All righty, there we go. So anyway, we have Jared Nunery, who's the Orleans County Forester, joining us. I'm going to let Jared introduce himself. He's going to kind of talk a little bit about things that's going on in his county and FPR, Forest Parks and Recreation. And then we'll open it up for questions. We'll try and have it where you can either raise your hand, there's a little button you can do that, or you can unmute and ask a question. If it gets to be too big, I'll ask you to type into the chat box and I'll ask Jared the question so he can answer it for the group. Keep yourselves muted unless you're actually asking the question or talking so that we don't have a lot of the background noise. And thank you so much for joining us, Jared. I turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I'll start off with a big caveat that this is the first time I've ever done this. It's thoroughly bizarre for me to not be able to interact with each of you either in the woods or in a room somewhere or in person. So bear with me. Thank you, Trish. But it's good to see some familiar faces. It's definitely something I've been missing. I see a lot of you, and I quickly envision our walks in many different forests as I look around the virtual room. But so as Lisa mentioned, I'm the Orleans County Forester. For those of us who haven't met yet, I was asked yesterday when prepping for this call with Lisa and Kathleen, what makes Orleans County special? And the answer to that is really simple. And I don't know if everyone on the call is from Orleans County, but those of you who are know the answer already. It's the best county. It's the best county for many reasons. And I think really it's because we have a little bit of everything. Some of the counties to the west, Franklin County's sugaring and agriculture. Well, we have that too. Really good, strong sugaring, always have been. Leading producer of maple syrup back in the early 1900s, a town in Orleans County. For this will test out the chat function. If you can chat which town, and I think and I'm pulling from my memory, so I'm going to make up facts a little bit, but just bear with me because I think it was 1908, the town in Orleans County that produced the most syrup. So put that in the chat function. We'll test it out, see if that works. If you get it right, you'll get a thumbs up from me directly towards the little box with your picture or name on it. So that town. So once we got that going, we also have the ponds. We've got the recreation. Was an Irisburg hap. We've got the skiing. We've got both downhill. We've got recreation. We've got cross-country skiing. And then even within the county itself, we have a tremendous variation in the climate. And I was just quickly looking up because there's 3 great resources, 2 of which I really trust the scientific rigor of their snow count for the year. The other one might be inflated slightly. So I'll start with the inflated one. And Jay Peak, maybe I know they like to tout a lot of snow, but the ski resort was reporting 264 inches for this year. There's a really good weather station in Morgan on the Ferens River, Anthony Lazara. He tracks with extreme accuracy. Ferens River Homestead is the website, and has a great meteorological station that he reports 155.1 inches of snow on the Ferens River in Morgan, which is just outside of Island Pond. And then down here in Craftsbury, 107 inches of snow for the year. So that kind of quickly shows you just within the county itself, we've got a lot of variation just in the experience of last winter. And that's true also for how things change here in the spring. And I get really excited about phenology and spring progression. And I was just emailing, I think it was yesterday or the day before, with Trish on the call now, and saying I can almost see the fields near Trish's house, and I've got greening up grass, and Trish got 8 inches of snow last week, and that's just even what I can see practically from my house. So tremendous variation in the county in how things are progressing, even in springtime, which is really neat. And that's kind of one of the things I was thinking from this group that would be neat, because you're all from all over the county. and also I think the state as well. So if you've got questions or just even things to share with the group, what you're seeing right now. Here in Craftsbury, just near my house, the leaks have just started to come up, or ramps. And that's to me when things are really getting going in spring. We've kind of come and gone with the excitement of the birds, although there's still more birds coming. The woodcocks have been calling for, I think it was almost 2 or 3 weeks ago that we had our first woodcock painting and doing the dance. But now is the like color coming back in spring. And I'd like to start things off with a quick little piece, and we'll get to questions in a second. And I've completely lost track of the who guessed the town, because I can't talk and read at the same time, so I apologize. But did anybody guess Holland? No? Well, it was Holland. Holland was the leading producer. Jim Judd, I saw that you were on. You were supposed to get that because I sent that to the Orleans County Maple Producers meeting a couple of years ago. I can't believe you didn't remember.
How do you know I didn't?
Oh, excellent. So, and like I said, again, it's just really good to see all of you. But my favorite book, Sand County Almanac, quick little reading about those spring things to notice, and particularly wildflowers, because that's what we're moving into now. That's the excitement that's going to start coming the next few weeks. The flowers as that snow recedes out of the coldest sugar bush. Jim, do you still have snow in your woods?
Yes, we do. And on the high part of our sugar bush, there's still probably 6 to 8 inches.
6 to 8 inches. That's in Morgan on what I call a colder sugar bush. So going to be a little bit for you before those wildflowers are out. But for some of us here in Craftsbury, they're already poking up. The trout lilies are already out, and the leeks are starting. But in Wisconsin, and we'll get to this a little bit if I keep ranting about Orleans County, about how great our soil is. Wisconsin, and where Aldo Leopold, which is Sand County Almanac, this book, where he was, soils were pretty sandy, much more acidic, not as great. So he had to calibrate with those sweet soils and the calcium. You get a wide array of beautiful spring ephemerals, those flowers that come out first. He had to calibrate a little bit more for more acidic, not so great soils that we have here in Orleans County. Again, Orleans County is the best, so we always have to remember that as we look elsewhere in the world. But in Wisconsin, the draba, and my pronunciation could be wrong on this, but a small, really delicate flower. I just had to quickly look this one up on Wikipedia before, hugely reliable scientific source. But anyhow, small little flower, you can look it up while I'm talking, but just one thing that's really worth noting, I think in particular, even for our soils here. So here it is from Sand County Almanac. Within a few weeks now, draba, the smallest flower that blows, will sprinkle every sandy place with small blooms. He who hopes for spring with upturned eye never sees so small a thing as draba. He who despairs of spring with downcast eye steps on it unknowing. He who searches for spring with his knees in the mud finds it in abundance. And so I guess what I'd say to each of you is search for spring with your knees in the mud. Slow down. It's a wonderful time to slow down because you can't walk more than 10 miles. You're not allowed to. So stay within 10 miles of your house. I'm not going to actually go down the stay home initiative, but it is something that I did want to bring up and point out too, is that we're in a really weird time right now. This is bizarre. I'm talking on Zoom to each of you instead of in the woods. This is weird, and this is weird in many ways. But it's a time, I think, to realize how lucky we all are to be here in Vermont, to be here in Orleans County, to be in an amazing place, and to really appreciate that place. If you have a woodlot at your back door that you can walk in, there's no better time than now to get to know it, get used to it, take a daily walk, and take that walk in the same place each day. And you can start to see some pretty significant changes and progressions. And you'll see like I see Hap, you're on the call. Hap, has the barberry started to bud its green leaves out at all yet?
Fortunately, no, but I have been going up there and whacking away as much of it as I can. But so not just yet. But I did find a ton of ramps. Yeah. So some
ramps. Okay, so the ramps are out in Albany, and that's a great, like, so the point being, you're going to see these changes, and one of the first things that actually starts to green up are the invasive plants, the honeysuckle, the barberry. And so in the next week or two, and for those not in Orleans County, further south, this has probably already happened. But it's a wonderful time where you can look across and just see out in your woods, and anything green that's kind of about 10 feet and below, not all the way to the ground, but that's going to be where you can spot your invasive species. And Lisa just put up vtinvasives.org, wonderful resource to get really a full rundown of virtually all the different species, and there's a lot of them. And we've got great examples of them all in Craftsbury Common right here. And someday when we can all get back together, maybe we'll do a walk and tour and look at them all. But in the meantime, when you're out on those walks, the next week or two is a great time to spot that random honeysuckle that's out there. In particular, look in your field edges. I always find when I'm in, and this is true on almost anywhere in Orleans County, honeysuckles are most ubiquitous one. And that, when you're out in the middle of a field, you can kind of look around and spot all the apple trees, and there's almost always one underneath the apple tree. And that you'll see, any guesses as to how it gets there underneath the apple tree? This is where I have to embrace the silence of Zoom. Time for you to unmute. Birds or chat, yes. It's that competition of who's going to unmute first, and then who unmutes at the same time, and then we talk over each other and we work through it. But we're going to embrace the awkwardness of Zoom on this. So yes, birds, absolutely, and that's the really the powerful, I guess you could say, attribute of an invasive species is it's many of them are essentially diuretics. They force the birds that spread the seeds to really go wild and spread those seeds everywhere they take a break. And that's why we find them oftentimes on the parcels in Orleans County that have a low presence of invasive species. When we do find it, it's usually in the field edge and oftentimes right by an apple tree. So take a look if you haven't, and you might surprise yourself and then be able to jump on it and take care of it early. Or you might have a really good opportunity for lots of manual work locally at home if you've got a pretty significant challenge of pulling lots of invasives. That was something Hap and I were chatting about on email. So Hap has a wonderful opportunity to control a lot of barberry this spring. And it's great therapy, depending on what you need, getting anger out. Some of them can be pulled by hand. Wonderful way to get your exercise, get your fresh air, get your therapy all in one. So lots of great chances. So all that said, I can keep ranting for a while, but before I take up all the time with the things I thought I might talk about, I wanted to throw it out there and see if you have questions that you came to this meeting with. Write them, perhaps sharing the therapy. That's excellent. Thank you. Write them in the chat, and then I think the idea is Lisa's going to facilitate it and bring those questions forward. So I'll pause. Lisa, are there questions already come forward?
Not quite yet, so I'll start with one. What do you see as changing in our forests as we address the idea of climate change?
Changing in our forests as we address the idea of climate change. So this one we can go pretty deeply on, but I think what we've seen here in Orleans County in the last 2 years is the impact of compounding stressors. And folks who have heard me talk at various events have probably heard me say this about the straws on the camel's back. And really we see this with the recent forest tent caterpillar outbreak. Depending on where you are in the county, if you're in the western part, you probably saw this on the hills in Westfield and even Lowell. If you're in central Orleans County in Coventry, down to Irisburg and Lowell Mountain, and then in Craftsbury, you could see kind of even different points as you headed towards Hardwick. Over in Morgan, you were kind of spared, but what I'm talking about is the forest tent caterpillar outbreak that defoliated, I think a total, and now I'm pulling numbers off the top of my head, about 64,000 acres across the state, but some pretty big swaths here in Orleans County, northern Lamoille County, and then also up into Essex County and Norton. And then what we see is in those areas that are defoliated, forest tent caterpillar is a native insect, comes around on a 10 to 15 year cycle, eats the leaves for maybe 2 or 3 growing seasons, but generally we don't see trees die. But on some sites, we started to see some mortality. And in that mortality, what we're starting to understand, and again, it's hard to really understand what killed a tree unless it was a chainsaw, because usually it's multiple things. But in these cases, many of the areas that we are seeing mortality were thinner soils. Oftentimes, the aspect might have been south or southwest, so really prone to drying out. And then we've had, even though our precipitation totals for the year may have been close to normal, folks probably know, some of you might have even experienced your dried up well in August or September. The last year wasn't as bad as the previous year, but we've still had a moderate drought, and then we were almost into severe drought in places in Orleans County 2 falls ago. So you get into that late season growing, a significant drought stress with defoliating leaves, and that's where climate change has kind of come in. And climate change it's exacerbated the impacts, the stresses that trees are normally facing. It's made them worse. And that's when you start to see, I think, those compounding impacts. And that's where we're going to see some trees dying. And that's when things get scary, when trees die, because we kind of think of trees as immortal, but they're not. They just last way longer than we do. But it is, I think that's what we're going to observe. I'm not saying all of our trees are going to die. That also, when some trees die, it opens up sunlight. It's more trees come in. Young trees are growing. It's really what we're trying to mimic when we're doing a harvest. But it is going to throw some of our tree species, especially those that aren't on their favorite sites to grow, where they compete best, where they're not in those places, it may be more challenging to grow, and that's where we might see some mortality. So there's a long response to that. Did we get a few questions in that long response?
We did. So since you're talking about trees dying, this is a good segue. Someone said they have a number of ash trees and they want to know if they should preemptively cut them. What's the story on ash and the ash borer here in Vermont?
Sure. Well, I tell people the only way you can assure that your ash tree is going to die from emerald for right now is by chainsaw, by cutting it down. That assures it will die. Emerald ash borer is pretty effective at killing trees. A lot of the early research that we saw in areas that were first hit by emerald ash borer, 2002 is when they first discovered it in Michigan. So they've got about 18 years of experience in places there. Some places we're seeing upwards of 99% mortality. That's pretty serious. Recently, just in the last year, in some of those areas in Michigan, they were seeing much lower rates of mortality in white ash. And so that does give us a little bit of hope, where it was really hard to find hope. And I like to look for hope, and I like to hold on to hope. And for a little bit, the science was pretty gloomy. This one study, and it's one of many that say otherwise, was finding much higher rates of survivorship. And that's really what we're looking for, is some sort of genetic resistance to express itself within the species. And we've seen that with elm. You might have heard of like Princeton elm or just other varieties that were individual trees that were found to have some level of resistance to Dutch elm disease, which is why Dutch elm disease is the reason why we have many elm streets throughout America that have no elm trees on them. Well, they did at one time. Like Craftsbury Common was full of elm trees. There's no longer any elms on Craftsbury Common, at least planted of substantial size. So I guess the point is there is some hope. I think there are some strategies that we can do for managing our ash to promote it, to retain that. Alan Yale, I saw you're on the call. We did a workshop on Alan's property last fall where we looked at that and where we see survivorship in ash when emerald ash borer populations are extremely high. They kind of move through an area described as a tsunami, is like a killing front where the population is extremely high. And the largest trees are the ones that are most impacted. Trees 1 inch in diameter and less are less impacted. So now is a great time to intentionally regenerate ash. So create some openings next to a female tree. It's dioecious. There are boys and girl trees. And if you just kind of go out there and save trees, this is actually, I say this because 2 springs ago, I was saying, all right, well, let's save like 10 trees per acre. And then I had to remember back to Silvex, oh wait, 10 trees per acre doesn't guarantee us seeds. We need some boys and some girls in order to make seeds. So that's another complication. And we could probably, this could be in itself an hour-long webinar. And I guess I'll leave it with, there are strategies, things that you can do to intentionally regenerate ash right now, being using silviculture, the art and science of how we grow trees, using that to create openings near seed sources, get young trees growing, because those young trees would likely survive that killing front as it moves through. They're smaller. And then when the post-killing front, and we're talking ash here in the state of a pandemic, but in that post-killing front time, the population will be lower. And at that point, we're hoping in that lower population, our biocontrols, wasps that we're releasing, also just the woodpeckers we have, other things that are controlling those populations. We're hoping to create some sort of a ecological stability, if you will, at that time. And that would be when those trees with some resistance would have the greatest chance of success. So we can kind of, where there is hope, foster that hope, manage that hope, and give it the best fighting chance. And maybe that said, probably Lisa, maybe another future webinar will just be all ash management. And we can go into much greater detail, the opening size, things to do, looking for males and females. Although June is a great time. You can tell, if you're asking how to tell male and female ash trees, look for the seed. That's really the only way you're going to tell. And in June or so, is when you're going to start to see the seed show up, more even in July. You can still see, even now, I was in my woods yesterday and on some of the black ash, I could see the stalks from the seeds, the fine stalks on the trees still. So you can see it a little bit in the winter, but seeing seeds, you can then know that's a female tree. You can put some flagging on that tree and know, okay, I'm going to work with the females and assume that there's always too many males around and spreading their pollen willy-nilly, and you'll get some seed. So
great, thanks. All right, we have a question from Hap about barberry. So he wanted to know, does it matter where the seed was in the cycle? I am barberry focused here, and the berries from last year have still hung on. Could through these still germinate naturally or via transport and digestion by a bird?
Yeah, and I think I'll have similar response app that I did by emails. I think you just got to go after it. When you have you've got an abundance there, and it's all about, when you have a really bad invasive problem, it's about taking off bite-sized portions. You can't eat an elephant in one bite. And trying to pick up those seeds or manage the seeds that are there. Yes, as much as you can do that, great, but also keep in mind that you're only human. So kill as many plants and stop more seeds from coming in the future. Concentrate that. Don't spread it around as much as you can. Some seeds are going to get taken by birds because you're not going to be able to individually pick up every seed. But you know what? There's thousands that you're stopping from this year and thousands that you're stopping from the year after. And in the year after that. So you're the real benefit of your work is coming in what's never going to happen in those future seed productions. So I guess keep your meals, when you're eating your elephant, keep your meals reasonable, and that will keep you out there killing barberry.
Yeah, we did an invasives webinar, and for those that are interested, we can send the link for that. But you know, it's not a matter of eradicating; it's a matter of controlling them in the space that you can, and encouraging others to do the same. And like you said, it is like eating an elephant. I love that analogy.
Yeah,
All right.
and some others, just to kind of build off of that. I know at Sterling College, there's on the land that Sterling has an abundance, well, really it's just Craftsbury Common has an abundance of invasive species. And to the point where the problem becomes overwhelming really quickly, the challenge becomes overwhelming. So rather, in that case, developing really a management plan specific to your invasive species, and they're looking outward. So not so much the hotbed, so try to tackle the concentrated area as much as possible, but also on the areas on the periphery. Before we got to a point where whenever they were harvesting any trees, creating more sunlight, they'd screen that area by doing a transect, remove all the individual where it's a scattered low density population to make sure they weren't making anything else worse. So concentrate efforts there and work back towards the problem was their strategy, which was a good one. And I think with invasives, there is science definitely to use. vtinvasives.org is full of it, but oftentimes it's also just, you got to do your best and be reasonable with yourself. And the biggest challenge, I think, is not burning yourself out and keeping after it. So I guess there's that human element to the control as well.
I'm going to jump back to Ash for a second. Someone asked a question about, is it possible to treat individual trees? They heard that there was a way, but that it could be very expensive. And what's that about?
Exactly. There is a way, and it can be very expensive. But the other thing just to remember, and the reason the expense is, and I'm forgetting off the top of my head, and maybe someone can write in the chat that knows, but I want to say like $10 an inch of DBH. That then has to, you're treating it every 2 to 3 years for the life of the tree. That's the expense. The real expense is it's not a one-time thing, because emerald ash borer is not going away. So really, when we talk about treating trees with an insecticide, it's a very specific tree, like maybe something on the, like, if there was a prominent ash tree planted in someone's name, if there's a prominent ash tree on a common in a town green, something that you really want to retain. There is some research, I believe UNH is doing it, where they're actually doing it more from the idea of seed source. So trying to treat and keep females alive to produce seed in that post-killing front. And then the other interesting thing I've heard in relation to treating trees was more from the social side of it. And this is kind of what inspired last summer. We did a celebrating ash event at the Stoner family woodlot in Greensboro. And similar to that, I think it was in Michigan, there was a group that was preserving ash trees in a forest simply so that people could go and continue to walk and appreciate mature ash trees. So it's that kind of social element. But individual trees in your forest, rather than kind of thinking about preserving them with insecticides, I'm encouraging people to think about how to promote genetic variation and manage that genetic variation for some success, because I think that's a more sustainable long-term solution for keeping ash on the landscape.
Great, thanks. So someone wanted to know, Jeff wanted to know when morels come out.
So I tell people Vermont is the safest place in the world. I've worked all over the world in different forests, and some, when I worked in the tropics, it seemed like everything you touched, my hand would start swelling. When I worked in Southeast Alaska, every little stick breaking was worried it was a brown bear. Here in Vermont, you don't have to worry about that. And the only way to get yourself in trouble in Vermont is to start eating mushrooms. And so I offer no advice on mushrooms, especially on the internet. So I am not going to go down that road. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, Steve is on the line, and he's new to the region and was wondering what the primary forest health issues are in the region and how you address them with forest management.
Wow, that's not a one-word answer.
No, it's not.
So I guess I wouldn't say primary, but I'll say the ones that come to mind first. Emerald ash borer, we've already talked about. The last few years, we were talking a lot about forest tent caterpillar. That's a native insect, comes in booms, and the population has since declined. Last year, probably the biggest thing that we were observing, at least aesthetically, was maple leaf cutter. It's a late season defoliator, cuts holes in our maple leaves. Not a big deal as far as health of the trees. Another one that I think where it's slowly concerning us more and more is it's a couple different kinds of fungi that are impacting white pine needles, and they cause the white pine needles to prematurely fall off the tree. And what you'll see in June, normally the needles will stay on a tree for about 3 seasons. What this fungus is doing, or 3 different fungi, are causing those needles to fall off after 1 year. And so we're seeing the trees start to turn kind of orange in June, and then we get a heavy rain and all those needles fall off. So the time isn't quite very long, but then when you look at the crown of a pine, it just looks thin, is the best way to describe it. It's not a deep green, it's not vibrant, because basically 2/3 of the needles are gone. And that's something we're seeing across the whole Northeast. It's worse in southern Maine and New Hampshire, but we've got it here in Orleans County as well. And we're starting to understand it. There's some long-term studies that have been started, monitoring plots. We've got, I think, at least 2 plots in Orleans County, but across the state. And so I guess that's another one that comes to mind. I mean, the overarching one is climate change. The impacts are, at this point, our climate has already changed. It's like a past tense. And we're starting to experience those impacts, those compounding impacts on our trees. And basically what they're doing is exasperating all the existing stresses that we already had. And we talked about that already. And then non-native invasive plants, and that coupled with very high deer populations. Again, much more severe problem in the southern part of the state than here in Orleans County. In Orleans County, we have invasive species, absolutely. I don't think we have it to the same magnitude that many other counties in the state have. Our deer population you may talk to hunters and they complain it's low, but anyways, I'm not going to go into that road, but I will say it's much harder to grow young trees to establish regeneration in southern Vermont than it is in the Northeast Kingdom right now. So that's a statewide issue. I think there's also, if you're interested, I just saw, and maybe this is something Lisa can share with the Coverts email or the various other ways this email gets, information gets sent out, but we have an annual forest health meeting, and that's in April, and this year it's canceled, but they're going to be doing online webinars on different forest health issues. And so maybe we can follow up with that. I just saw it was sent out. And so get on the Coverts email listserv, and I bet we could get those webinars out there as well for a variety of other forest health issues.
Yeah, the first one starts on the 22nd, so we'll be sending out information on that as well. Anybody can join our e-news or Vermont Woodlands Association e-news, do both, and you sign up for them on our websites and learn about various online programs and then future programming that hopefully when we all get an opportunity to get together, you can join us in person. The next question that I see, is there a way to contain witch's broom?
Witch's broom. Are you containing it? I guess the question, so really the only time we talk about containing it is in blueberries, not in balsam fir. And in balsam fir, we don't worry about it too much. It's balsam fir. Well, I guess that actually reminds me of a forest health issue going on that I didn't talk about that's actually really important here in Orleans County is balsam fir, and it's balsam woolly adelgid that we're seeing more so. The witch's broom, we don't really worry about. It's kind of like a neat thing to point out in the woods. And at this point, balsam fir has got so many other bigger stresses, balsam woolly adelgid being one of them, that many trees, if you look at sideways, they're going to fall over right there and then. They're already on their way out. the witch's broom and the balsam fir is not a big deal. If you have it in your blueberries, that is much more concerning. One of the controls that I've heard is to eliminate balsam fir within a quarter mile, which means move to a different state. Because we've got a lot of balsam fir in the woods, and it's because the thing creating the witch's broom has a co-host living both in the balsam fir and in the blueberries. And so if you take one out of the scenario, you can eliminate it, kind of like white pine blister rust and currants. But we have so much balsam fir here in Orleans County that it's just unrealistic to do that. So I guess I'd say if you're worried about it in your balsam fir, don't worry about it. Balsam fir has bigger issues. Think of it as kind of cool.
I like that. I like that. That's what I always say about using bird boxes. You know, it's a bluebird box, but if I get a tree swallow nesting in there, I think it's cool, right? Same thing, you know.
As long as you didn't really want a bluebird.
Let's see, down in the chat box, do you use GIS to identify, inventory, and categorize areas where there are specific forest health concerns?
Yeah, and I guess we use a combination. So it's GIS is definitely used, but rather we get more real-time information in aerial flights that we do. So each year in the summer, we used to do this more later in August, but we've started bumping it up with the forest tent caterpillar survey to when the first tent caterpillar outbreak, we bumped it up to more like mid-July in order to capture the defoliation from early season defoliators. But what we do is we fly transects north and south, up and down the state, and basically a plane gets on a line north and south, and you go straight up, and you're flying. I think it was about 2,000 feet above the canopy, and you have a scrolling. It's like a computer with the map scrolling as you go, and you're looking down. Basically, I think it's 4 miles, or maybe it's 4 miles across the middle. But anyways, you're looking down and mapping as you go forest health issues, and it sounds kind of crazy. You're going at about, I think it's 100 miles an hour or so. And by the end of it, I tell you, you get some wicked headaches. You do that for 6 hours, but it's actually pretty surprising what you can pick up from a plane. You can see that's how we mapped all that white pine issues that I told you about, because you can tell even from that elevation, the different canopies, you can know what the species are and make pretty darn good guesses. Even as far down to beech bark disease, you can see on a whole aspect, because the individual beech trees will be bright yellow when everything else is green. And we map that way. That information all gets pulled into GIS. Then it gets field truth to make sure that when somebody wasn't on the wrong mountain or something when they were drawing on their contour map. But that's the basis of the beginning of our spatial data for forest health issues. And that's done every year. And that's where, when you get these numbers of 64,000 acres defoliated from forest tent caterpillar, it's coming from flying in those planes, then taking that into GIS. You could use ortho photos in GIS to do this as well, but they come out not at the same frequency that we're looking for, not with that real-time capacity, and we can control when we're looking the timing specific to the forest health issue we want to understand. Kind of like early season defoliator, we move the aerial survey up a few months. Late season defoliator, we could push it back. So it just gives us the greater flexibility to get the data we need.
Interesting, thank you. I'm going to ask you, how do you prepare to go out into the field now with the concern about ticks? Do you do anything different, and what would you recommend to people out on their land?
Yeah, so again, Orleans County is the best county in the state. We have the lowest tick occurrence in the state the last time I saw, and that was lowest number of black-legged ticks, but also the lowest number of black-legged ticks with Lyme disease when they test for them. There's a researcher out of Linden State, I guess it's now Northern University, whatever Linden State's called now, that does research on that. So I guess I start with that caveat. That said, the ticks are coming north, and they're all the way up to Bluffside Farm in Newport City, and we're starting to see them here in Craftsbury. I personally have this is wood I'm knocking on. I have never gotten a tick on me in Orleans County. I do wear pants that are treated with permethrin. And I wear those when I'm in the woods. I do daily tick checks, and we check our children every day. I think the hardest thing for us right now, kind of being on the front of ticks just arriving, I'd say this with like going through it with checking our kids every day, is when you get so used to not seeing any that you get almost complacent. So I think trying to be vigilant, but at the same time, not get scared. Not get scared to be in the woods, because it's a manageable fear. And as long as you know how you can either, by wearing treated pants with permethrin, you can also just, that daily tick check is very important for your body. And so I guess those are the main things. Is it's not that big of an issue, but they're coming. We're seeing them across the county, and vigilance. And if you're comfortable wearing permethrin, that's been effective in some places, but I have less experience with that than many other places in Vermont where you might have 60 ticks on you in a day. That doesn't happen here in Orleans County yet.
Okay. Someone asked, so it sounds like it's okay to go sit in the woods, or, and draw or do forest bathing or whatever they want to do in the woods. They're good to go as long as they take those precautions.
Yeah, with forest bathing, you'll probably want to make sure you have your soap. But beyond that, I think the greatest fear I have with ticks is that people become afraid to go to the woods, because that's a far bigger issue than even Lyme disease, because we can manage ticks through treating our clothing, through inspecting. You can tuck your pants into your socks. And with knowing tick habitat, those brushy areas, the forest edge, when you're deeper into a shaded cedar swamp, that's not really tick habitat. So you're less likely to have exposure there. So starting to familiarize yourself with those areas that I guess I now have keyed into my brain when I'm in a site that's like, I describe as ticky, that kind of like tall brush, scrappy area. Barberry, I'm pointing to you, the hap there again, is that one plant that's actually been shown to increase the populations of ticks, in particular black-legged ticks, because it harbors habitat for mice, which are the vector then that the ticks are after for their blood. So there are some things you can even do to control barberry, reduce potential tick habitat. Those invasives create perfect tick habitat, another great reason to get rid of them. So know the habitat, do your tick checks, treat clothes if that's, again, a personal choice. But I think as you get into higher densities of ticks, you're probably going to embrace things like permethrin more.
Sounds good. All right. Alan T. writes, I only have a small property, and as I try to control the few invasives that I am confident in identifying, I see the recommendation to paint cut stems or stumps with glyphosate. Are there alternatives, ways to keep the stumps from regenerating?
Sure. And so depending on the size of the plant, if you can pull, and the type of plant. So again, VT invasives will give you specific treatments for every species, because depending on the different species, they're going to have different treatments that are going to increase your efficacy, meaning they're going to make it increase your bang for your buck. You can pull, like honeysuckle is a great one that you can actually pull out this time of year as the soil's really soft, is a great time to yank it out, hang them upside down, burn them, do what you want to get rid of them. Hanging them upside down is important though, to keep those roots off the ground, desiccate the roots, kill the plant. If it's really, really big, you can try, and I've worked this with some landowners that really didn't want to use chemicals, is when your population's smaller, like you say you have a small woodlot, and you can actually manage it by cutting it, returning, cutting it, returning, cutting it, returning, and you may be doing that for 6 or 7 years. But there's like one landowner in Charleston, Reed Cass, I don't know if you're on the call, Reed, or not, but working with Northwood Stewardship Center where they're hand pulling Phragmites, which many people would say that's an impossible idea. And they've been doing it for, I think, 5 years now. And the population's getting smaller. It's a longer term control effort, but you can do that. And the positive of that too is that you're going back to it regularly. So you're monitoring it that way by going back annually and removing it. And if you're doing that pulling too, you might start to think about time of year where now's a great time to pull honeysuckle because the soil's soft, but maybe something like Phragmites, you might think of when can you do it to the peak amount of energy has been pushed out of the roots, then you steal it by removing it, and then you come back, do that again, because the idea is you don't want it to be able to start creating energy out from the sun and putting it back into the roots, so strengthening. You want to steal energy at all chances. And again, vtinvasives.org has information on that timing for removal as well for each species.
So a question to follow up with honeysuckle. Isn't it difficult to get all the roots from honeysuckle when you pull it?
Sure it is. Get as much as you can. You're not going to get everything. But again, I come back to this. The recommendations are great. But at the same time, we are people and there's a certain reality to it. And no, you can't get every root, but if you get a lot, it's not going to improve the health of the plant. That's for sure.
Steve had a follow-up question, I think, on the surveying. He says, do you use baseline vegetation map for inventory and monitoring to help identify changes over time that might be related to climate change?
Personally, as the county forester, I'm not, but there are other people doing that with research, folks at UVM, and to some degree, we some of the long-term monitoring that we do with FPR, I'm thinking of, we have long-term monitoring plots in our sugar maple and some other ones that does track that change. And then also the U.S. Forest Service does long-term monitoring plots with forest inventory and analysis data. So I guess I'd say there's a lot of people working on that. And there's an organization that was called the Vermont Monitoring Cooperative, now called the Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Cooperative. I say that, and the acronym I don't fully remember, but they're working and kind of bring all those folks doing the different work together because it's a tremendous wealth of information. So bring it together and then synthesize that. So that's a long response to, personally, I don't do it, but a lot of people are.
I did put the website in for the FEMC, Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Cooperative. You can find a lot of information on there about monitoring and what they're doing. Let's see. Elizabeth asks, for bank stabilization by planting trees, we haven't had much success with willow stakes taking hold. Do you have any other suggestions?
I guess I'd look at why, always say, why haven't you had success? Is it because a beaver nipped them all off? Because then the suggestion would be to think about the beaver. So try to identify the root cause of the problem if you can. Are they desiccating? Is it ice scouring? Depending on if you're on like the Missisquoi River and there's big chunks of ice just ripping it out of the ground. So figure out why they're not taking. If you can't figure that on your own, once our stay-at-home issue is lifted, give me a call. We'll come out and go for a walk. If you're not in Orleans County, give your county forester a call. We'll go for a walk and help you figure out why. Because rather than give you a guess, figuring out the actual root cause of the problem is important.
So here's a question for a forester. Do you have a favorite tree and why?
Absolutely, yellow birch. It's a yellow birch with a close runner up of cedar, northern white cedar. Yellow birch though, because it's kind of the does it all tree. Wonderful timber tree, but also really valuable for wildlife habitat. What's really cool about yellow birch, the petioles of the leaves themselves are much shorter than something like sugar maple. Like you think of sugar maple, that long stem, the like leaves out here, and you got the long stem. When you've got that and you're a warbler, you can't actually even forage on. If I had a third hand, this would work really well. But the leaf foraging. You can't do that with a sugar maple because the petiole is too long. With the yellow birch, you can. And so you see way higher use in many different birds of feeding on yellow birch. Not to mention the seed source is available year round. It's kind of hanging on in the winter. So it's, again, food sources out there. Its shade tolerance is kind of across the board, meaning it can tolerate, it's called intermediate tolerant, meaning like it does a little bit of shade and a little bit of sunlight, like some disturbance, comes in quickly. And then within the birch family, most of them are going to last 40 to 120 years. Yellow birch, I've cored some in the Adirondacks that were well over 300 years old. So it can kind of come in. I say, you think of succession as a party. There's like the folks that show up early. There's the folks that are there in the middle of the party. And then there's those few that are like there at 3 a.m. just hanging on to the party and never want to leave. Yellow birch is kind of like there the whole time. They're there at the beginning of the party and they're there to the end. So yellow birch. Northern white cedar, because I call Orleans County the cedar capital of Vermont. So you got to love that too.
Great, great. If people are looking at their forest management plan, and like kind of, this time of year, I advise all of you, if you haven't done it, need something to occupy your time, take your forest management plan off the shelf and start to read it. When they're reading it and they come across things like AGS and UGS and crop tree release, what are some of those terms that they might see in their forest management plan, and what do they mean?
Sure. AGS and UGS, AGS, UGS, acceptable growing stock is the AGS. And basically it's the bias that we put on our trees for what we feel is good tree for growing timber. But generally that also correlates with a healthy tree as well. So nice straight tree, no wounds on the tree, no sign of that's going to bring this tree to a short end to its life. That's our acceptable growing stock. And generally we want to keep that proportion of the trees higher than the unacceptable growing stock, i.e. we want more healthy trees than unhealthy trees. And those trees also happen to be better for timber as well. So that's why you see them in the management plan, that AGS, UGS piece is, but we could oftentimes equate it to, and it's not a perfect jump, and we could get into nuances of definitions from the U.S. Forest Service or the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation, that and this, but we're not going to do that now. All this kind of takeaway is we want healthy trees. We want trees that are going to last a while in our forest, and that's that AGS to UGS. The crop tree release is kind of a way of taking those trees that are the healthy ones, the AGS, AGS, acceptable growing stock, and releasing a little competition from those trees. I tell people with all ages that I work with, there's 3 things a tree needs to grow here in Vermont: soil, sunlight, and water. And we've got a fair amount of water. We're no real shortage of it. I mentioned droughts, et cetera, but generally we've got water. Our soil, as I mentioned, here in Orleans County is the best, really good. So the major limiting resource is sunlight. And so with crop tree release, what you're doing is giving a little bit more sun, a little bump, a little more energy to those best trees that you want to really make sure they thrive.
Great. There's a question here about timber harvesting operations. Are they driven by demand for timber or by ecological outcomes? And is it a challenge to manage both simultaneously?
Well, I guess you'd have to ask the landowner of that timber harvest. I don't think that's a general question that the answer would be determined by each specific harvest. But yes, you can manage for both, absolutely. And we see that, I'd say, on most of the harvests that I visit, where there's some sort of an ecological attribute that's being incorporated into the harvest. Maybe it's keeping a snag, a standing dead tree, standing, because recognizing that's really important. Maybe it's managing for a particular species. Sometimes it's trying to increase proportions of trees that you know are going to produce lots of fruit for wildlife. So I think most of the harvests that we do aren't necessarily driven by solely one factor. Oftentimes there might be influenced most heavily by a factor, whether it be timber or wildlife habitat management. But usually there's a variety of attributes in each.
Great. Yeah, it's very important. That's one of the things we work with in the Vermont Coverts program and training, is letting people know it's about you as a landowner and your goals and objectives for your forest and your property. And that's like the first step in determining what the plan is. So I think that's really a great answer. Thank you, Jared. It looks like there aren't any other questions in the chat box, and we're right at 9:55. If anybody has any last minute questions, we probably can take one or two more. But in the meantime,
things to slip in. Can I slip in because we got a couple minutes?
I was just going to turn it over to you, so
Okay.
Go ahead.
Excellent. Well, there's two things I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of, because I was trying to think of what is something you're at home, you're by your computer, things that you can do that might be interesting. One, if you haven't already found ANR, Agency of Natural Resources Atlas, that is a valuable tool in learning a ton about your land and the land around you. So Lisa's putting it in now. You can zoom right to your property. The property boundaries from the tax maps are going to come up. And when you do that, you can also toggle on and off lots of different information. There is a current use layer in there. You might think like, oh, that's not my actual property line. There's some errors, yeah. But it'll get you in the ballpark idea. You can see your land. And then one of the really neat things to look at is the soils map. So you'll see under the geology tab, there's soils. And once you turn that on, all of a sudden the screen's going to change different colors. There's going to be all sorts of different polygons out there, but there you can click on them and that'll link you to a specific fact sheet about the soil type. And you can start to really understand the different soils that are mapped on your property. Then if you want to go deeper, literally deeper, you can turn that off and turn on the bedrock information. And the bedrock is where it's kind of all starting. That's the foundation. And that's a really, really important piece for understanding kind of the site quality as well. Because here in Orleans County, we're almost split 2/3 on and off a particular bedrock that really drives a lot of this is where both white cedar and sugar maple thrive, is when you're on this Waits River bedrock. And that's going to be, when you look at the bedrock maps, this light blue. And it's really important, to the point, like my daughter's middle name is Waits, after Waits River formation, because it's what really makes the site the prime site. And you hit that right along the Black River. East of the Black River is where you transition onto the Waits River formation, and you're going to see way more cedar in the lowland areas. And then when you get on the better drain sites, you're going to see sugar maple, and that's where you're going to see your ramps. When you go west of the Black River, you transition off of that, and site quality might decrease slightly, and you might start to see, especially as we get closer to the greens, more hemlock and red spruce mixed in with your hardwoods. And it's all kind of coming back to that bedrock leaching into the soils and improving it. And you can get all that from ANR Atlas, along with a lot of other things, rare, threatened, endangered species, habitat blocks. So taking your property, zooming way out so that you can start to see where you fit in. And different parts of Orleans County really are this critical linkage between a big block of forest land in the Nullhegan Basin and the spine of the Green Mountains, which runs kind of up and down the state. So check that out. And then the other piece, well, I had a bunch of books that I stacked up to say what I was reading, but I guess I just say share with your friends the best books that are going on. We've got, I was really excited to hear that Lisa's organizing coming up a talk on the new Wetlands, Woodlands, Wildlands. Really fun book on natural communities that just came out with a new edition. If you're looking for kind of the technical side of things, and if you're looking for good explanations, our commissioner, Woodswise, great book that's kind of these short, fun to read pieces about what's going on in my woods. If you're in Orleans County, in southern Orleans County, crossing to safety, Greensboro, this is just a fun one. This literature, that's not trees, but, and then if you've got the romantic forester dream, the cover is not going to see, but Cache Lake Country. This is if you want a book about being a forester back 1900, going off and just figuring out what's going on in the woods, that is the book. And then the other ones, if we've got any parents on the call, I wanted to share a couple of really cool ones that I've enjoyed reading with our kids. This one, Up and Down, this is just a fun idea, and they have seasonal what's going on in the soil and above the soil, below the soil, the birds. This is really good for right now. We've had our first big night in Orleans County for the amphibian movement, salamander room. There's another one called Salamander Sky that the author, I think, is from Montpelier. If you're interested in timing that with any sort of rainy night we've got coming out, still going to have amphibians moving, but Monday was the big night around here. And then we've had a lot of fun with Paddle to the Sea. And I have to do a quick shout out to my son. He's whittling his own Paddle to the Sea. And we've been studying the water course from Little Hosmer all the way out to the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and we're going to release this and track it. So if you happen to find this along the Black River, put it back. We got to paint it still. Put it back so it can make its way out to the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So those are the pieces I had to fill time if we didn't have it, but I rushed through it instead.
Great, it's 10:01. We're going to wrap up. Hannah does mention, and she wants to know, or at least point you in the direction of Diana Hutz Aston. Diana Hutz Aston, so 3 names. First name Diana, middle name Hutz, then last name Aston, kids' books. She says they're amazing. So I share that with you as well. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We are doing this every Friday, so you can join on with any county forester. Jared is amazing, and I think that we have amazing county foresters throughout the state. So I hope you'll join us in meeting them and hearing about them. You know, Vermont Coverts is happy to bring this to you along with Vermont Woodlands Association. You can get on our e-newses so you can learn about other programs by going to our websites. You can join VWA or you can contribute to Vermont Coverts to see these things continue along. We appreciate that. And if you have any other questions, you can email Jared. I'm going to type his email in the chat box, or you can email myself or Kathleen, and I'll put those in the chat box as well, and you can get those. But thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Hopefully you'll get outside and implement some of these things you learned about today. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Do a Sundance.
That's right.